Can you hear that?" Susie said to her husband, who was dead asleep. He didn't answer. She shook him again, hoping she didn't have to be surrounded in the darkness alone. Still no answer, not even a grunt of anger. The dreaded buzzing sound annoyed her every day this week. Why was she the only one who could hear it? She didn't have a clue. Taking the blankets off, she decided to listen for the sound to see where it was coming from. And slowly down the hall, trying not to make a peep, she glided gently along the walls in the dark. "Miss Susie?" A man's voice said in a low, calm voice, and Susie came to a complete stop. Her heart beat faster as she sensed someone in front of her. Like a slow, cool breeze, she couldn't make out any solid objects. Squinting, she still couldn't see if anyone was in front of her. The breeze still came toward her, and she could feel her body shiver with each hit of the mysterious wind. "Why aren't you lying with your beheaded husband?" The voice slowly became a person right in front of her eyes. His head evolved from the air into a man not from this earth. He wore a large black hood that covered his whole body, and he floated above the floor by several inches. When he smiled, his sinister teeth caught the glimmer of the moon. Susie stepped a few inches back, feeling a pain on her heel. She didn't whimper, though. Her fear took over her, making her almost paralyzed. The man's hand, long and disfigured, came pointing towards the door of her and her husband's bedroom. With all of her strength, she looked towards the doorway. She didn't see anything until she felt something hit her head and her eyes closed. 2 months later, their daughter came into the house. She had brought along her boyfriend. "You never told me what happened to your parents," he said, smiling and holding her hand. She smiled, but it was an empty one. She looked down, not sure what to say. "They died over 2 months ago. It was a big tragedy. Apparently their house was robbed and they got caught in a robbery gone wrong." Her voice twinkled with sadness. He nodded in sympathy, not saying another word about it. She knew what she had told him was a lie. How could she tell him that her parents left the house and had gone somewhere without telling anyone? To top it off, the house was completely destroyed after their leaving. She sighed in regret, lying to her boyfriend like this. They entered the house side by side. All the furniture was there, but the walls were bare. "You go ahead. I'll wait out here for the U-Haul truck with their stuff in it." That's right, she thought. They had brought beds and tons of boxes. She nodded and headed towards the darkness that filled the once happy home. She walked through the hallway, imagining what happened the night they decided to leave. What could have caused them to? As she was walking along the corridor, remembering all the good times she had as a child, things began to look different to her. Stopping, she squinted at the wall. She gasped and tried finding a reasonable answer, although nothing could hide the fact that there were indeed scratch marks along the side of the wall. Cats, someone running with scissors, vandalism. Rational explanations kept flooding her mind. It's such an old place, maybe it's vandalism. Kids must have picked the lock, snuck in, and used a knife or scissors to scratch up the walls. She thought aloud, smiling to herself. Nothing to worry about then, she added inside her head. Next, she headed towards her mother and father's room. With a hint of sadness and doubt, she opened the door to find nothing or no one in the room. Before now, she had opened this door millions of times, seeing them smiling at her and feeling the love run through her body. Now all that runs through her body is the sadness of never seeing her parents again. "Chels, it's here," Brad called her from the front door. She immediately shook the daydream away, but couldn't help to feel that something had been there with her. Following her boyfriend's call, she was comforted with the 2 other men taking down the boxes and the bed. Hours later, the truck had been emptied. They thanked the two men for their hard work and paid them $20 each. Upon unpacking the boxes, there was one marked with a strange symbol. "What is it, Brad?" she said, noticing that he was motioning for her to come where he was. "What's this?" he asked, sounding excited. She shrugged as she examined the mysterious mark. "I don't know, looks like an ancient symbol or something." He looked at her with wondering eyes that said he wanted to open the thing. She looked at him and said, "If you're thinking about opening this thing, then forget it. It looks weird and evil. I don't want to unleash some demon thing or the devil." He laughed as soon as she finished. He rested his hands on her shoulder and said, "But don't we live on Devil Street?" She gave him a sarcastic look and continued with her packing. Later on in the evening, she had fallen asleep. Brad looked at the unopened strange box that carried the mysterious symbol with curious eyes. If Chelsea's asleep, then it'll be perfect because she won't know, right? He thought as he grinned to himself. He grabbed the box and headed to their used-to-be Chelsea's parents' room, but now it's their bedroom. He closed the door gently, and without a second thought of regret, he opened the box to find a simple laptop. It must be Chelsea's old laptop, he thought as he held it in his hands. He could feel something trickle down his spine. Not enough to cause hysteria, though, but enough for him to shiver from the cold. He looked to see the window and thought maybe there was an opening in it. He opened the laptop, and the last thing he saw before he faded to black was the Google homepage. It must have been midnight since it was still dark when Chelsea opened her eyes to hear a faint buzzing sound. "My phone," she said, surprised but worried if someone was calling her. She checked her pocket, but it was not coming from her phone. Well, it has to be Brad's, she thought as she held the wall in the pitch-black hallway. "Brad? Brad?" she called in a semi-scream, semi-whisper tone. Suddenly, the buzzing stopped. She sighed and headed to the bedroom to sleep on a real bed. She awoke in the morning to find that she was alone in the house. Maybe he went to the store, she thought as she got dressed and made breakfast. She ate her meal and thought about the buzzing sound again. She assumed it was Brad's phone, but he never puts it on vibrate. It suddenly slipped out of her mind as she was faced with more unpacking. She was in the middle of putting away dishes when she heard a slight sound. It was like a high-pitched breathing, only low and drawn out. She looked around the corner, but every time she did, the sound would stop. She soon figured it was nothing to worry about. Later that night, as she was getting ready for bed, she heard it again. This time it was much, much lower. She looked around the room to find nothing strange or anything that could make that noise, and she continued to comb her hair, ignoring everything. Suddenly, she realized something was missing. Her boyfriend. He hadn't come back since he left this morning. She also realized that she hadn't even seen him leave. She called the police, but they said they couldn't do anything until the next day. She nodded and thanked them. She hardly slept through the night, playing scenarios of what could have happened to him. In the middle of those thoughts, she had fallen asleep only to wake up to the same buzzing noise. She got up and listened closely. It couldn't have been the neighbors because there weren't any around. It couldn't have been a cell phone because she had turned hers off. And she wondered if it was the alarm clock she had recently bought. She unplugged it and the buzzing had stopped. She was relieved that it was the only alarm clock, and she fell back to sleep. Later at 3 a.m., she was awoken by the same buzzing sound. She got up and looked at the alarm clock. It was off, but where was the sound coming from? She got up and checked the whole room to find nothing. Thump. She immediately turned around. It came from under the bed. She grabbed the flashlight, and with closer examination, she saw a laptop. Maybe it used to be Brad's, she thought aloud, trying to reassure herself. She slowly reached for it, but she immediately felt pain alongside her arm. It burned, and she yanked her arm back to find a large scratch. It could have been a nail from the floor, she thought. As she went on to the living room, grabbed a broom, and came back to the room. She eventually got hold of this laptop and put it on her desk. She fell asleep and waited till morning to check the thing out. As soon as she got dressed, she sat at the chair to her desk. Opening the laptop, it didn't seem different, other than it not having any brand symbols. The only symbol on it was the one in the lower hand corner, the same one that was on the box. Then she thought back about Brad wanting to open the box. She got angry and couldn't understand why he had left. The laptop started to her normal Windows Vista sign-in screen. There were 2 accounts on this laptop. The first one was called First of All, and the second titled Secondly. She decided to click on the first one. It opened and nothing seemed to be odd, unless you count no programs and a plain black desktop background. Odd. She examined everything, making sure to find at least something, and finally found a text document. Regretting her decision and curiosity, she double-clicked it. When it opened, it appeared to be 2 pages long. She read it aloud, hoping it would calm her nerves. First of all, I would like to thank you for purchasing this laptop. It means so much to me that you would go out of your way for the person you hate. As one of the 9 satanic statements say, he represents vengeance instead of turning the other cheek. Now, let me explain what will happen to the person you despise. Much like a voodoo doll, but the total opposite. You give them this or hide it from them to find, and once they open it, they will be sent to hell for all eternity. You have exactly 5 days to cast the spell. She stopped reading and sadness filled her stomach knowing someone had hated him. Bile raised from her throat, causing a lump, and eventually a tear flew from her eye. She sobbed as her heart was breaking, and she felt something tickle her spine and grew to become something sharp. She felt the pain in her lower back, sharpening until she became numb. Don't worry, my dear. A low, calm voice flushed over her. You'll be all right soon, he said as she became dizzy, the wall spinning out of control as her eyes fluttered and stayed shut. The police were soon called by a friend who visited them and haven't heard any signs for the past 5 days. They barged in and saw nothing and no one. The walls were naked without any decoration. The rooms, each one, hollow without any furniture. The only thing remained was a simple laptop in the middle of the master bedroom. The policeman examined the laptop and found a text document was opened. No words were written down. He logged off, but before shutting down, he logged into the one titled Secondly. Curiosity got the better of him, and he was confronted with a nice family portrait. An elderly couple with a young lady holding a young man's hand. He smiled, and a text document popped up. It was titled, Whom You Wish to Curse. Text. It read simply, The Newton Family. We did this. The following is a letter found on a college campus within a library by a young student who reported the mysterious text in the hopes of an investigation. It should be noted there is no evidence supporting the author's writings, nor have there been any studies on the subject matter at hand. The writer was never discovered, and all investigation have ceased. Taking all this into account, it recounts a very odd set of occurrences and should be read with discretion. The letter seems old, so parts of it are illegible due to aging, and sadly could not be recovered. It wasn't supposed to be this way. I didn't intend for this. If you're reading, then perhaps there's still a chance. Maybe I'm not as mad as everybody thinks I am. If I can convince you, then maybe, just maybe, we can stop it." The next 3 lines of text are covered by a strange red stain. It seems, though, that the author is hoping someone will read this and is addressing the audience directly. The writer suddenly jumps backwards chronologically, almost as if trying to start from the beginning, trying to explain himself. "I grew up in Mississippi as a hardcore gamer. I was never the athletic type, and I was somewhat scrawny, so I turned to games to help me feel stronger. After some time, I don't exactly remember when, but I decided that I was going to go to college for interactive media works. I believe the local community college called it. At 19, I started my first semester and moved to campus for my first semester at community college. For some reason, the name of the college is scribbled, almost as if the writer didn't want anyone knowing where he had studied. But it should be noted the writing was found in the library of Hines Community College. It had been pressed between the pages of a copy of Stephen King's The Stand. My roommate and I hit it off great, and together we'd build up a nice little man cave. Where the hell did they go? I know they're watching me. I could feel them. Stop them. Get them away from me. The writer appears to have a brief psychotic break as the next couple of lines continue with these odd ramblings with no clear subject. Whatever the writer is talking about, however, seems to be watching him. When our writer returns from this rant, it's almost as if it never happened. He doesn't even acknowledge the strange, cryptic writing. Our room was stocked with sodas and energy drinks of all sorts, and a slew of consoles and games. I also had a laptop of my own I'd gotten as a graduation gift. We got along great, never really having an issue, and even though we did have some ground rules, we never really stepped on each other's toes. We would greet each other each morning before leaving for class, and then spend the late afternoon just goofing off together. I had just earned an academic refund and decided I'd spend a little on myself to buy a game. I went through the usual routine of going to GameStop and browsing for a few hours. I stumbled across a copy of Super Mario Galaxy. Of course, I heard good things about it, and I decided it would be worth the quick buy. I made the transaction at the counter and returned to my dorm. I arrived at my room, popped the disc into my Wii, and played. I have to admit, I enjoyed it. It was a nice distraction from grades and school, but I had this strange feeling, almost like I was being watched. I racked that up to the fact we had security cameras in our dorms. After a few days of playing this as much as possible, stopping only to eat, sleep when necessary, and attend classes, I managed to complete the main game, but I never managed to shake that feeling of being stalked. A few weeks would go by, and even though I had stopped playing the game, that sensation persisted. The next words are blurred beyond repair, possibly caused by a coarse rubbing with the fingers or hand. This is further evidenced by particularly severe wrinkling and tearing of the paper around this area. It should also be noted here that in the following parts, the handwriting changes ever so slightly, becoming sloppier and more rushed, as if the writer is suddenly in a hurry. I don't have much time. I have to finish this quickly. Weeks would go by with that gut-wrenching instinct, something telling me that I wasn't safe, and I was in real danger. And despite this strange feeling, no matter how much I looked, how meticulously I searched, there wasn't any identifiable threat. The last day of the semester would arrive, and as sort of a celebration, my friends, my roommate, and I all threw a small party. We had passed our classes with no issue and just wanted to enjoy our few weeks of freedom for Christmas break. We took pictures, we drank, we did everything you could think of that night. Christmas break came, and I passed the time by watching YouTube videos and playing games. I stumbled across something, much like people tend to do on the internet. Apparently someone had found these strange creatures in Super Mario Galaxy. He had video evidence, and even had found the texture file. These mysterious creatures were called the... Again, black scribbling through the name. The videos and all the posts were old, and I wanted to see if they were in my game. So, I revisited the game and played through a few of the worlds, until I came to the one they were supposed to have inhabited. I looked for them, but they weren't there. I assumed this was some sort of weird hoax or just a prank, but I decided to look into it. I had managed to find closer images of these creatures. They were strange, with the top end of their body being larger than the bottom. It appeared that their eyes were just voids through which you could see into their souls. And there it was again, that sensation of being watched, that horrid feeling that someone was stalking me. This time, however, the feeling was accompanied by a new dread. There were whispers. They started out as a singular, low whisper, but it slowly escalated into hundreds of thousands of voices, until eventually it became a continuous, never-stopping drone. It was driving me crazy. Finally, I cried out, "Shut up!" and it stopped. I heard loud footsteps coming up the stairs, accompanied by my mother's voice. "Are you okay?" I heard yelling. "Yeah, I'm fine, Ma." I hadn't referred to my mother by anything other than Ma in years. I returned my focus to the screen. This creature, if so many people had seen it in their games, why hadn't I? Here it appears the writer took a small break, because the lines that have returned to the original handwriting are somehow neater. What day is it? I can't remember. I've been trapped here for too long. I can't keep my focus. My days and nights are blurring together. The sun doesn't rise and set here, and everything is so disorienting. Possibly another break on the behalf of the writer. The mind is such a wonderful thing. We can create entire worlds. If we can create worlds, then we could feed them, right? And if we could feed them, we could starve them. And if we could starve them, we can kill them. I kept researching these mysterious entities, constantly having to rest and try to shake the feeling of someone looking over my shoulder. What was that noise? By now it appears our author is struggling to stay focused, with text being relevant to the topic interspersed with the occasional break from the story. As I looked into every video, text, and image I could find on the subject, something about this creature seemed oddly familiar. Soon it had become an obsession. I began frequenting blogs and sites, researching as much as I could about these. Again, the name is scribbled, as if he didn't want to let the name go. Where had I seen this thing before? Suddenly it hit me. No, that couldn't be. I furiously typed in a new URL, redirecting me to my Facebook. I went to my uploaded photos and navigated my way to the folder of my college photos. And there it was, that horrifying image. It was standing in the background of almost every picture I had taken since playing Super Mario Galaxy. They were hidden in plain sight, whether it be off in the distance, veiled by the fog, or hidden behind a tree or building, but they were always there. Our writer seems to have sketched an image of the strange creature, one that looks exactly as he had described, but with an added detail: 2 needle-like legs that stick out from the image. I'm safe for now. Here they can't see. I switched to a more recent folder, and I noticed as time went on, and as my obsession grew, the creatures grew closer to me in the photo. There it was, that whisper again. This time it was slightly louder and escalated more quickly than the first time I'd heard it. I wanted to scream out again. Maybe it would stop like the last time, but my voice failed me. I couldn't even muster the will to move my lips, and my eyes grew heavy and I couldn't stay conscious anymore. As I drifted into the oblivion of sleep, I heard something clear and profound. One of the whispers sounded closer than the rest, as if it were right there in my ear. "You did this." I awoke in this world of free-floating microplanets. You should know this world. Certainly you've seen it before. The world where they were born. If you're reading this, then there's still a way out of this world for me, but there's no place left for me there. I can barely stay sane enough to write this letter, much less function in society. But if this letter finds you, then you could seal this world away, locking them here, with me. There they are, watching me, just waiting to see what I'm going to do next. If this finds you and you read this, then don't keep it to yourself. Spread it to everyone. They exist. They are real. As long as you think of them, as long as you continue to give them strength, they will take more. But the moment you move on, the moment you stop caring about them, then their world will break. One person's thoughts aren't enough to keep them healthy. They need more. I could keep them here, but I can't do it alone. It appears this is the end of the letter, several pages long and crinkled and brown, and even though the paper appears to be old, the writer references very recent things, such as the Wii and Super Mario Galaxy. The letter is also spotted with brown and red fingerprints. However, there is no evidence of foul play, and without a name to be searched, we can't say for sure whether a missing persons report was filed. Found on the laptop of Detective Art Spooner. I think Captain Gold is worried that I'm losing it. Sometimes I think I might be. I haven't seen Marty for days. He was supposed to meet me at the Larrabee last night, but he never showed. I'm starting to get very concerned. Casey is gone. I think I lost her a long time ago, but now she's gone for good. I'm sorry, it occurs to me that I'm jumping ahead of myself. I need to stop and recollect my thoughts. There's a lot I don't remember and even more that I do, but it might not be true. My name is Arthur Spooner. You could call me Spoons. I'm 49 years old and I'm a narcotics detective in Lake Davie, Florida. In the past year, a drug called Kissy Face entered my city. It spread through our young people like the Black Plague. But this ain't the first time I'd seen it. July 22nd, 1995. It was one of the hottest nights of the year. Any year. My partner, Marty Kefferman, and I were working the north side. And one day the two of us were called to assist in a raid on a crack house. I'll never forget what that dispatch sounded like. Ruth Portnoy was our dispatcher. She'd always been a rock of stability. When she put the call out, her voice was rife with panic. All units, converge on 185 Bowden Street. Shots fired, officer down. Sweet Jesus. It sounds like there are animals, 1091V. Repeat, 1091V. God, the sounds. We damn near broke our necks speeding our way there. Marty was the driver and he drives like a maniac. And that was the last time he drove, though. Every time after, he insisted I drive. I can't say I blame him. It affected us all in different ways. In all, 4 units made the way to the house. 7 cops in total making the bust. Myself, Marty, Raphael, Suarez, Mikey Tancredi, Eve, Pernicki, Sam Hawkins, and Eddie Gold. Eddie Gold didn't have a partner. He didn't like working with people.
Jimbo, Mikey, and Sam didn't make it out alive, and the rest of us wish we hadn't. Now, try as I might, I can't fully describe what I saw in there. Everything looked rubbery and slick. I remember the floor was slippery, and it felt like we were walking on, well, hell, I can't parse this. You see, I have no idea what it might feel like to walk across the giant set of lungs as they breathe. But that's about as close as I could come to describe what it felt like. There were people. Well, I guess they could be called people. You see, we knew about Bowden Street. It's in a neighborhood that has gone to absolute shit. And 185 was the house where it all seemed to come from. We knew it was packed with meth-addled squatters, and that some major players in the game dealt from there. We knew it, but something kept us from investigating too thoroughly. For one thing, the area was mostly controlled by a dealer named Dodge, and stepping on his territory was asking for more trouble than any of us were prepared to deal with. We knew he was involved with Kissy Face, and we knew that it was no ordinary drug. We just didn't know how out of the ordinary it was. You see, Kissy Face starts off by increasing your libido to insane levels. You start having orgasms at the slightest touch of a hand or even just a breeze. And it makes you want more of the stuff until you're lost in the sensations. Parties where the Kissy Face gets brought out tends to turn into orgies. Casey went to one. Just one. She got hooked immediately. Now she's gone. I don't know where she is, but I have an idea. I don't want to pursue that idea. Because if I'm right, she's never coming back. The crack house had become the Kissy Face house. It was full of users, and by the time we got there, we saw these fleshy lumps that had random eyes, noses, mouths, fingertips, teeth, hair, intestines, brains, and all that sort of stuff. Just sort of sprouting randomly from all over them. A lot of them had open bleeding orifices that none of them seemed to notice. They were leaking fluids everywhere. Blood, water, spinal fluid, liquid eyes, fat, and yeah, sexy juices too. They were moaning, all of them. It sounded both like they were in horrible pain and horrible pleasure all at once. There were a few that looked mostly human as well. They maybe hadn't been using for as long. They were coupling together, with their flesh already starting to merge. It sort of looked like one long string of rubbery tissue, undulating in the air, one end attached to his shoulder and the other his groin. I realized with horror that he had part of a uniform on him. He was the officer on scene we'd been called to help. But you see, that wasn't the worst part. The worst part is the walls and the floor seemed to be made out of the same fleshy stuff the lumps had become, and people were turning into. And it was all pulsing, throbbing, with fresh fluids dripping down the walls like a syrupy waterfall from nowhere. All around us was reddish pink, slick and writhing, and we could hear this sound, animal-like growling, and an even worse noise, like someone laughing while screaming. Stuff was reaching through the walls from various places, stuff that looked just as fleshy as the rest, but even more alive, twisting various appendages that would find the nearest body, or whatever you want to call it, and drag it more into itself. Some of the appendages seemed to have mouths. Some seemed like a cluster of tiny hands, eye stalks protruding from the little fingertips. And then something happened I'll never forget. Mikey slipped on the slimy floor, and he never got back up. At first he was screaming, begging us to help him, and the next minute one of those things was on him. His face went immediately from terror to bliss as he began to be submerged into the pink muck. His clothes were ripped apart, piece at a time, by little fingers that started to dissolve the material. Looked like acid was melting them. Then Jimbo fell, grabbed onto Sam on his way down. We stood and watched as it happened again, to them both. And even though I was scared shitless, I'll admit right now that something about the atmosphere was making me inexplicably horny. I felt like leaping on Eve and taking her like an animal, or even just sitting down where I was, taking care of myself right there. Then I spotted the officer on scene again. He didn't look human anymore, his body a big lump of jelly sloughing off of his organs, which were also sliding apart like melting gelatin. But that arm, if you still could call it an arm, was still going. I shook my head and tamped down my feelings of arousal until only terror remained. I started to run, but my shoes were sticking to the floor. Now I admit, I wasn't running to help my friends. Nothing could. I was running for my life. With great effort, I managed to lift my feet and book it, and I could hear Marty behind me doing the same. At one point, he screamed, and I turned around immediately, saw that part of his arm had scraped against the wall, and now he was being pulled in. I grabbed him and pulled, and the next thing I knew, both of us were sprawled against our patrol car, crying, puking, trying to stay standing, but unable to without holding on to the car. Sam, Eddie, and Eve were laying on the porch when I saw that my strength came back just long enough to drag them off and onto the yard. You see, we all took an oath to never to speak of what we saw. I kept it. I don't think Eddie did. He's captain now and in charge of my department. Sam's with Eternal. It's kind of weird that they assigned him to my case. Eve's with the DA's office now. Only Marty and me stayed right where we are. Now I knew Kissy Face was back in town when I found pictures saved on my daughter's phone. I won't tell you what the pictures had in them. Some of you could probably guess. I never thought my Casey could ever get involved in that, but what's crazy is that she never denied it. The cravings were already so bad in her that she decided to ask me for help. She wanted to kick the habit, a habit she developed with her first hit. I tried to get her help. Really, if you believe nothing else, believe that. I was desperate to save my little girl and get Kissy Face off the street. I managed a meeting with Dodge because I thought he was behind it, and I thought I could work out a deal with him to keep it out of my district. I never should have done that. Someone got photos of me talking to him. Don't ask me how. Marty was supposed to be with me, but he didn't show, and so he's in the clear. But as for me, I was suspended with pay and Sam was assigned to investigate me. I tried to get a hold of Eve to see if I could get her to help in clearing my name, but she wouldn't return my calls. And now, I can't find Casey. The last I saw of her when dropping her off at her latest therapy session, a session I was later told she didn't show up to. Marty and I met at our usual spot, a secluded part of Larrabee Cemetery, and planned it out. We were both going to go to Captain Gold and get him to confide in us if there was another house like Bowden. We didn't know what to expect, but there was trouble when we tried to reach him. For one thing, they wouldn't let either of us into the building, not me or Marty. I finally got Gold on the phone, but there was something in his voice as I talked to him. It was like he didn't know me or understand what I was talking about. He claims that Marty isn't on the force anymore either, and refused to even talk about the house on Bowden Street. But I know there's another Kissy Face den, and I'm gonna find it. Things are getting weird in my own apartment building. Seeing red lights and hearing what sounds like sucking sounds from behind the doors. I think the floor in the hallway outside my room is getting softer. A few hours ago, I left Marty a message, asking him to please meet me at the Larrabee as soon as he got the message. I went to our usual spot, and I'm there now. He hasn't shown. I'm waiting here, leaning against his gravestone and hoping he's okay. The stone is pretty scuffed, probably old enough that it may need a replacement.